Hello and welcome. This is Cheryl. Thank you so much for joining me today. In this video, I'm going to share with you how you can use your press plates for gelli printing. I have these 3 different press plates here, and some have dies to go with them from Spellbinders. They kindly sent them to me to use, share, and create with, and share it with you. So I'm actually going to use my gelli plates with distress inks today. My favorite ways to use my gelli plates are with distress inks and alcohol inks. And this is going to be the easiest way to do these techniques. Some of these I think will work with acrylic paint, but I also didn't want to be trying to clean acrylic paint off of my Betterpress plates. So this way I don't have to clean them. I can utilize that ink on that plate, and I will show how to do that in a minute. So I have 3 different colors of distress ink here. I'm going to stick with these 3 colors throughout the video just so that I don't have to clean off my plates and brayer in between different colors. I have a 6-inch brayer here, and I have 2 5x7 gelli plates here. Now I have them on printed or on some scrap paper just so that you can see the colors on the plate. The one on the right has been stained with alcohol ink. It doesn't affect the printing in any way, shape, or form. So the first one here, what I did was I put those inks on there, used my brayer to blend them together, and then just pressed the plate on that ink. And you can see how it easily pulled that ink up to create the pattern on my gelli plate. Now that ink is still on the press plate, so I can utilize that. I have some hammer mill cardstock here that I'm just taping to the clear part of my Betterpress system and putting the plate on there. And I'm trying to be careful when I put the plate on there to not touch the raised portion and possibly remove any of that ink. And you can see how it transferred over beautifully. I'm going to do the same thing here with the Cosmos backdrop plate, and once again you can see how I get a beautiful print out of it, and I get some really nice ink blending. The cardstock that I used in the Betterpress system was the hammer mill, but the half sheets of cardstock that I'm using when I'm printing it right off the plate is Nina Index stock. These will be listed and linked down in the description below. It's a nice thickness. It's a thicker than printer paper. It's not quite as thick as the cover stock that everyone uses for card bases. I ended up ordering it by mistake, but I still use it for this anyways. So I repeated the process with the inks on my gelli plate, but this time I'm taking a black ink pad and I'm inking my press plate before pressing it into the gelli plate. Now, before I forget to mention this, you will notice on some of these where I'm using the scripts, some of those scripts are backwards. I still use those prints for backgrounds. Some of the ones that are not backwards, and those are the ones that I'm using in the Betterpress system, I will die cut and use them for sentiments for my cards. So this one here, if you looked really closely, you would see that the words and the printing is background, but I'm using it just for the texture. And adding that black ink to the press plate before putting it right onto the gel plate adds some different texture than just putting the plate on by itself. Different instances, I think you would use different methods. So that black ink is also still on that plate there. I'm going to put it in my Betterpress and put it through my Spellbinders Platinum 6. And when I get the print here, it's pretty much black. If you look really closely, there is some color tones to it. So it did pick up some color from my gelli plate, but mostly what you see is black. These ones I'm setting aside. I probably won't use them for the cards that I'm creating today, but I just wanted you to see that you can do that as well. And also that when you use your sentiments on your plate, it will be a reverse image. So here I'm using the flower stems press plates, and basically I'm just trying to ink them with a blended ink. And then I will be printing those flowers in order to die cut to create into cards. Now this one at the top here is going to be pink and purple, so I'm not going to have any green on that one. I knew that going in, and I'm totally fine with that. I'm just creating some embellishments for the front of my cards. Now I'm pulling that ink off of there. Now, one thing to note, that image is backwards, so the dies will not match it. So I can't use that for embellishments on the front of my cards because the dies won't match in order to die cut. So that one is not one either that I would use as a background for a card because it's kind of an odd print, but you could do, say, an all over print and then use it as a background. My main purpose was to get the ink on those press plates and then put it through my Platinum 6. Now, the next way I want to use my press plates is by embossing them. Before I do that though, I want to make sure to clean the plates off really, really well and make sure I don't have any ink residue on them. If I have ink residue on here, it is going to transfer over to the cardstock. And while that could be an interesting look, it's not what I'm going for the techniques that I'm using these embossed papers for. So I just used a baby wipe to wipe it off, and then I used a cloth just to dry that off. These are distress inks, so they come off really easily, and I'm just using the stacking in my Platinum 6 for embossing a die cut. It uses the exact same stacking. If you have a different die cutting machine, look in with your manufacturer and see what their stacking is for embossing a die cut. You would use the same one. So I'm embossing both the Cosmos background as well as the You Are Everything Sentiments plate. I want to create backgrounds out of both of them. And I'm using that same index stock. Again, it's nice and thick for this. It's not too thin, but it's also not way too heavy. At one point, I mixed up my pink and my purple, but that's okay. I didn't even notice it while I was doing it, and that was the point there that I realized that I had done it. I am using regular distress inks here. Distress oxides would also work. The only reason I didn't use them is I wanted my colors to be slightly more vibrant, and the oxides have a little bit more of a chalky finish to them, but they work exactly the same way. And I'm using this embossed paper I'm printing it on both sides. That way, once I'm done, I can cut it down, and then I can choose which side I want to use on my cards. Now, some of that ink is still on that plate, so I'm using some more index stock to pick that up. And I typically will put everything to the side and at the end decide which ones I'm going to use. Ones that I don't use for these cards, I'll save and use for other things. But you can see how quickly and easily it is to print a bunch of different prints. The main thing is to have your cardstock already cut to lift up the prints. Here I'm using an extra piece of cardstock to do that second one. I didn't want a chance that some of that distress ink might still be slightly damp on the cardstock, and I didn't want to smear it. But you can see how quickly and easy, as long as you have all your supplies ready to go, you can get a ton of prints out of this. And because we're using distress inks, it's all washable by water. I don't need to worry about having any special cleaning solutions to do this. If I were to do this with acrylic paint, I would easily be able to do the one with the embossed paper without having to clean off a plate. I think if you did it with the press plates, I mean, the acrylic paint would clean off of the press plates, but I think it would be a pain to have to do that. So this I found was the easiest way to do that. And here are all of the prints that were created just in this short session. Some of those flowers are meant to die cut. Some of the sentiments that we printed on the Betterpress plate, especially the first set, are going to be die cut for sentiments for this. But a lot of them are just going to be backgrounds for cards. I'm only going to create 6 cards in this video. I didn't want it to be too long. And because all of the colors are the same, they look fairly similar to each other. And I thought if I did more than that, it would look a little bit repetitive. So I'm only doing 6 for this, as well as the fact that if I wanted to do more than that, I would probably want to do some more flowers. I really love how beautifully blended these flowers turned out, and they make perfect embellishments for the fronts of cards. You could, if you only wanted to do the flowers, you could blend your ink on the gel plate with the brayer and then brayer your ink onto the flowers and then print them from there. But it's also nice to see different ways of doing things. And if you wanted to create an all-over print from those flowers on the Gelli plate, it would be very easy to do. So all of these papers here, I'm cutting down to 4 inches by 5 1/4. I'm going to put them on a white card, so I'm going to have that white border around it. The only one that I'm cutting at a different size is this one here. These are the first prints that I made off of that Gelli plate. I'm cutting them at 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, and I'm going to put them in my Betterpress, and I'm going to print off some of those flowers on top of it and utilize those papers. These could be used as backgrounds, but I've got a ton of backgrounds that have been created, so I don't need to do that for this. So I'm putting my flowers on here, and I'm going to take the paper, tape it onto the clear plate of the Betterpress, and then I'm going to use that same black distress ink up my flowers and print it on there. I'm only doing 2 flowers for this because I'm only using it to create those flower embellishments. I'm not using this to create a background of any sort. So I run it through, press that ink right into there, and you can see that it transfers beautifully. I'm going to do the same thing on the second piece of paper, but I am going to swap out one of the flowers, the one that has the 2 tiny flowers. I will pull that and then put the other one in there so I have a little bit of extra variety. Once again, using that same black ink, and I'm using black ink because it's got nice contrast with the colors, but you could use whatever colored ink you want. If you wanted to, say, use a darker color of the colors that are on that background there, you could absolutely do that. So you can have some fun with the different inks that you use. The Betterpress can use so many different inks and so many different papers. The best impression happens with the Betterpress cardstock, but you get a lot of beautiful results in ink transfers with other cardstocks as well. So in order to glue everything in place, I'm using the Barely Art glue, and I have it in a nice fine tip bottle so I can precisely place things. I did a lot of my die cutting off screen because it's fairly repetitive, and I didn't think you really needed to see it over and over again. I did cut or tape those flower dies in place before die cutting them. I wanted to make sure that those dies were not going to move around, and by taping them into place, it makes it nice and easy. While I am gluing things down, I use acrylic blocks to hold things down just to make sure nothing moves. It makes sure it's got some good contact, and it frees my hands up to do other things in the process. The last step, I wanted to add just a touch of sparkle. So on the center of the flowers, I'm just dotting some stickles. I'm not completely covering them, I'm just dotting it. Remember that this is distress ink, so it is a dye-based ink. These stickles will rehydrate that ink, and if I do kind of a blob of stickles in the center of ones that have multiple colors of ink, they're going to blend and run together, and it's going to change the look of it. So I'm just dotting it just enough to get a little bit of sparkle and keep that texture that's in the center of the flowers. Once that is done, I let that sit and dry. And here is the finished result. These ones that are done with embossed papers have some really lovely texture to them. And because all of the same colors were used throughout, it was really easy to pick and choose which backgrounds to use, which elements to use as focal points on the front. And they all coordinated and tied together really nicely. Because those letterpress sentiments have so many different choices, it was nice to have a lot of selection to be able to choose different sentiments to put on the front of these cards as well. Thank you so much for taking the time to join me today. I really appreciate you being here, and I hope it's inspired you to use your Betterpress system and your Betterpress plates for different techniques in different and unique ways. Have a fantastic day.